back here to open. Although COVID-19 numbers continue to surge across the nation, there are still plans to reopen schools nationwide. Here in New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio's plan calls for a partial reopening with classroom attendance limited to 1 to 3 days a week in an effort to curb the coronavirus outbreak. Now, despite millions of students in the city, particularly those from low-income communities of color, they already face barriers to their education. And joining us now to provide a little bit more insight and get us into a little bit further depth of this is the executive director of the Harlem Gallery of Science, professor of physics at Brown University, and also president of the National Society of Black Physicists. We are joined by Stephon Alexander. And Stephon, good to have you. It's a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Well, thank you. It's especially a pleasure to be part of this show because, I am a native of the Bronx, New York, and a proud product of the public school system, New York public school system, and especially from represent Junior High School 142, DeWitt Clinton High School, and PS 16, all schools that I attended.
Well, represent. Let's talk about representing in the area of, schools reopening. It's hard for you to imagine that the schools are reopening, I guess. The mayor plans on reopening schools here in New York. I know that's something that you're not necessarily in favor of. What is your perspective on the mayor reopening of schools?
Yes, I have. I'm highly troubled on many fronts of the mayor's plan and the city's plan of the current form of reopening, meaning a partial reopening, 1 to 3 days, depending on the school and the situation of school. So let me just state that, all data and all voices, and when we talk about in New York City, the idea of listening to the science, well, according to one of the most prestigious community of scientists, the National Academy of Sciences in Medicine and Engineering, which is, that's it. I mean, that's the body of scientists that represents our very best scientists and scientific voices nationally and globally, actually. National Academy of Sciences recently stated in a document in their research finding that that schools, especially in areas that are doing well, like New York City and New York State, basically they should fully reopen, especially in K through 5, full reopening, because the educational and long-term risks, right, that the city will be taking regarding our students far outweigh the health risks. And of course, I can talk about the health risk, and actually that the data has shown, especially in Europe, for places where schools have reopened with especially elementary school kids, that the risks are lower actually with young kids than their exposure to adults. So the point here is that all the data, all the science, and univocally the scientific community stated that it is much better that we fully reopen, especially in elementary schools. So just in terms of the health risk mitigation, it's in favor for us to fully reopen. Now, the question here is that I'd like to get into some more detail, of course, soon about what could be done. But basically,
yes.
Let me just say another thing, another way of thinking about this, that the long-term and the short-term impact it's going to have on a whole generation of young people in our city, our students, our kids, all right? And the impact, this should be, a partial reopening should be the last resort after every option is exhausted. The question I have for the city, for the United Federation of Teachers and all bodies, city council, is have they exhausted, have they been creative enough, given the risk factors in terms of the well-being of our communities, our young people? How responsible are we being as adults, given that we are the caretakers? And who is this impacting? Well, I did some basic research. According to our Census Bureau, around 50% of the children in New York City are from single parents. And almost half of the household heads in New York City are single parents. This is basically who, we're talking about on the order of 500,000 students that will be basically, as far as I'm concerned, coming from a single parent whole, I grew up in a single parent household in the Bronx. My mother was a nurse. She had 5 boys and 1 girl later on. Listen, if she had to go back to work, we were basically left at home alone, right? And you know what happens if, growing up in the Bronx, let's be real. You're gonna be on the street corner most likely. These are the kind of, I would say, blind spots that some people somehow are not taking into consideration. This is a huge liability when we're thinking about the impact in our community and all of the other risk factors that come with a decision that, from my perspective, seems to be a tad irresponsible. Irresponsible.
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
Yeah, no, I know. I got to shift gears here for a minute. Talk to me about your position. Recently appointed as the executive director of the Harlem Gallery of Science, and talk to us about your responsibilities. First of all, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's I've been fortunate throughout my career to have had various appointments, and this is something I'm especially proud of and take great pride in, because I've always, I always said to myself that being a kid at Dewey Clinton High School in the Bronx, and with my friends, and seeing the dismal reality that I as a young Black man had, about whether or not I would even be able to get out of the Bronx. I remember just one day dreaming that if I were to make it, I would come back and try to make a difference. So this is finally the opportunity for me to do that. And so a big part of my responsibility, I think it's very important for especially our young people to, we're in a science and technological age, but there's a huge disparity in terms of access, but also the messages that are sent to our young people. I want our young people to see people that look like themselves, that are no different than they are. And I hope that I and my colleagues, when we come back into the city, that we'll be having very interesting programming, where we get them excited and expose them to science and technology, to the science and issues that are relevant and that impact them, such as COVID-19, to just get that curiosity going. Because, I am from that environment. I grew up there, and, I did okay, and I want to see more of that. And when I talk about the impact this has on our community, you know what? If I was a young person right now going through, facing what a young person will be facing in New York City that look like me, that's from my background, I probably wouldn't have made it. I probably wouldn't be here. And so much promise, we're betting against that promise. So again, we need to be very careful and very thoughtful, very resourceful and creative as we forge forward and try to fully reopen, especially elementary schools. So let me just say, my responsibility as executive director of the Harlem Gallery of Science is we're going to be creating some really exciting projects and programming and engagement with the young people, getting them excited about science. And especially what we're going to be doing that's unique is exposing our young people to scientists and people in the technology spaces that look like them, that they could relate to, that they could dream to become like. And that is not devoid or dissociated from them. Right? The idea is that we want them to really feel an ownership and see a future and see a realistic future for them in the here and the now regarding STEM and STEAM.
Right. Well, we got to get ready to get out of here. But for people who want to get in touch with you, how do they go about doing that, particularly at your new position?
Yes, you can get in touch with me very directly. So you can reach me at my email, which is Stephon Alexander, STEPHONALEXANDER @me.com. Now, I usually get a lot of emails, so you'll expect to hear from my assistant to kind of get things going. Or you can just go on and check out my website, StephonAlexander.com, spelled the same way. Or you could just contact the Harlem Gallery of Science. We have some people there that can plug you in. But definitely keep your eyes out for some future exciting programming that we will disseminate to the public soon. And expect to see me once schools reopen, hopefully. And we'll be pressing on that even more so. Let me just actually add, I know that there's some concerns that teachers have about their health and safety. And one idea, I taught right after college, I taught high school, even though I didn't have the complete training. But I think we have a lot of opportunity with a lot of smart young people who are less at risk that we can put to work and get them engaged. We've already shown that with Teach for America, for example. And we are at the Harlem Gallery of Science, we are engaging actually in a elementary school STEM program with with students at the National Society of Black Physicists. We will also be doing we will be walking our talk and launching our own program that will basically augment and help out the greater Bronx, students of color in New York City, and students of low income backgrounds in New York City. So we are also walking the talk and look forward to working to help the city figure out creative ways. Their options are out there. This could be done, and we don't have to sacrifice an entire generation of young people's well-being and education. Instead of trying to find a reason not to do it, let's find reasons to do it for their well-being.
Stephon, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for sharing with us here on Open. And of course, Stephon Alexander, our guest here on Open. Thanks again for being with us.
Okay, represent BX.
All right, Bronx Strong it is, my brother. All right, look, take a quick break. We will be back with more shows. Stay with us. We're coming right back right after this.